Hey there everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm that Scottish nerd that brings you Pokemon TCG content as well as gaming and entertainment related videos. If any of that interests you, be sure to subscribe down below as I do upload videos multiple times a week. And in today's video we're back with Theme Deck Tuesday. This is where I take a theme deck in the Pokemon TCG online game and review it, and I have some matches with it. There will be timestamps in the description as always. Let's start off by having a look at Drednaw here, as he is the title Pokemon of the deck, and we do get one copy which is holographic, nice and shiny. So he does have one very interesting attack, and that is Vice Wave. For 3 energy, he is able to do 80 damage, which is already a reasonable amount for the energy cost, but if you put Nessa during your turn, then the defending Pokemon is paralysed. So if you're hitting into a Pokemon that has more than 80 HP, maybe it's a stage 1 Pokemon like Drednaw here, or even a stage 2 evolution, then you're going to be able to paralyze that Pokemon if you played Nessa. That's going to be really effective for slowing down your opponent and being able to hit into it again the following turn for 80 damage and get the knockout that way. We do have a total of 3 copies of the Drednaw as well as 3 of the Tootle here. It does have an attack for 2 energy, 40 damage, and the defending Pokemon can't retreat. Definitely not the most efficient, but it can be useful. And the other main attacker that we have in the deck here is the Samurott. It has an ability which reduces damage by 30, which is already great in the theme deck format, so it's definitely a welcome ability to have. And its attack for 3 energy does 120 damage, and you may put 2 energy on the defending Pokemon back into your opponent's hand. But thankfully we do get to choose, because if it was mandatory this might actually help out your opponent, because rather than those energy going in the discard when you knock out the Pokemon, it would be going into their hand. But we do get to choose that, and if we want those energy to be discarded then we can do so. But if we're going to stall, then that's when we want to try and put the energy back into our opponent's hand. Definitely a reasonable attacker to have in the deck, and certainly a welcome one since we have a 3-3-2 evolution line of that, so it's very feasible to get that out consistently throughout the matches that you're going to be playing. Now we also have a nice little combo and backup attack here in Cramorant. For 2 energy you can discard as many Arrokuda on your bench as you like, and you do 60 damage for each of those. So this can be reasonable in the early game, but it's definitely not sustainable since you do have to discard those Arrokuda, although we do have Nessas, as you'll see, to get those Pokemon back. And the Arrokuda itself, we do get 3 copies of those, so you can do up to 180 damage. And then it does evolve into the 1 copy of Barraskewda, which is very notable as it has an attack for just 1 single energy. It does 20 damage for each damage counter on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if your opponent switches out their active Pokemon and tries to stop you from dealing damage and getting the knockout, then you can evolve into this Barraskewda and use that attack to get the knockout. And since it's in the active, you can attach an additional energy and start swinging for 60 damage with that Jet Headbutt attack. So some great selection of Pokemon. We also have this final Pokemon here, Wishy Washy. Shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 8 cards. Definitely a great way of getting some hand size built up and developing your board. And you can always put some early pressure on. 20 damage for 1 energy is reasonable, although you do only have 30 hit points. Having a look at the supporter cards and trainer cards, this is some of the best supporter cards that you'll see in any of the theme decks. It's just a shame that the Pokemon itself isn't the best, as we'll get into throughout the matches. But the main supporter card here is there's 2 copies of Professor's Research. Being able to discard your hand and draw 7 cards is the most powerful draw in the Pokemon TCG, so it's definitely going to be very useful in this theme deck format. And as I mentioned, we also have a couple of copies, well 3 copies of Nessa here, which allows you to get up to 4 in any combination of water Pokemon and water energy from your discard pile. So that's going to allow you to reuse those Arrokuda, as well as getting back energy and comboing with that Drednaw that we looked at. And then the rest of the supporters is pretty common stuff. We have the Sonia for searching. We have the Hop to draw 3 cards, Dan to draw cards, as well as Bead or Bede, however you want to say it, and that attaches energy, some reasonable acceleration through this card as well. And then of course for the trainer cards we have Evolution Incense, Great Ball and Switch. So not the best search for the item cards, but we definitely have a great selection of supporter based draw. So let's get into some matches. Be sure to leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it at any point. We're starting off this first match here with our Wishy-Washy in the active spot. Definitely our preferred starter Pokemon here. We'll attach an energy to it and just pass it over to my opponent since we are going first. Not able to play a whole lot of cards down. But my opponent is playing the Surfetched theme deck over there. And they also have their preferred starter in Sudowoodo, which is going to allow them to use double draw, start drawing a whole bunch of cards. Now we do have a lot of supporter supporter cards that we can choose to use, and I think getting some basic Pokemon down here and using our Sonia is going to be a good option. Definitely want to get our board developed and get those starter Pokemon out. So I'm going to get a Tootle as well as the little Pokemon here, what's it called again? Oshawott, of course. I keep mixing them up. I think the stage 1 is called Oshawott for some reason, but it's not. It's called Dewott or Dewott or Uwott, mate. I have no clue what that one is, but anyway, we have that. We can use Evolution Incense to grab ourselves the stage 1 since we already have a Drednaw in our hand, and we'll attach an energy. I think we'll put it onto the Oshawott here, get ready for the Samurott coming down, and I kind of want to hold off since we have our evolutions, so don't want to shuffle our hand into our deck with Wishy-Washy. And since we didn't do any damage to our opponent either, they wouldn't be able to deal any damage back, since Sudowoodo's attack here does 10 damage based on the damage counters already on Sudowoodo, and it doesn't have a base damage. So definitely don't want to do any damage to it just yet, because that would get our little Wishy-Washy knocked out. So we're going to hold on to our hand, get our evolutions into play, nice and easy, and then stack up some energy on our benched Pokemon. Also using Sonia again to get out some basic Pokemon, and then we can just use Wishy-Washy to shuffle our hand into our deck. I think we could get out Cramorant or perhaps our Barracuda to work towards, or Arrokuda to work towards Barracuda, or even getting out some more Oshawott, but we only have the one Samurott, unfortunately. So I'll definitely grab a Tootle here, one of those, and we'll get an Arrokuda. Stick those onto our bench, and then we will go for our Wishy-Washy, shuffling our hand into our deck and getting a nice big hand size to match our opponent. We get into a bunch of energy, which is great, you love to see that, and we also get some nice evolution Pokemon going here. My opponent is also just going to be working on their evolutions and getting energy onto their Pokemon as well. They go with a Great Ball. See what they pull off of this. I mean, they're bound to hit a Pokemon with the amount of Pokemon that theme decks play. They're just bound to hit one, but they're certainly taking their time with it. They do grab a Pokemon, a basic Pokemon, and immediately put that into play. So they're powering up Pokemon on their bench here. They have the Galarian Surfetched, and it has Meteor Assault for 180 damage, but then it's unable to use Meteor Assault during its following turn. So it's guaranteed to get a one-hit knockout when they bring that into the active spot. Then on the following turn it won't be able to get a knockout, as it is only doing 40 damage. But they can use that 40 damage to get a knockout on our Wishy-Washy, since it does only have a pitiful 30 hit points, as we mentioned. So now we're in a bit of a predicament, as we don't have a lot of great options to put into the active spot here. I think we're going to have to promote a Tootle and just let it get knocked out. sacrifice it a little bit. We don't have a huge amount of great options here. You could always put the Drednaw down, but again they're just going to use that Meteor Smash or Shower or whatever it's called, Meteor Assault, one of those. So we'll definitely have to put down another Shootle so that we can evolve there. And then we can start attaching some energy onto our Drednaw. I think we'll use Bede to get an extra energy attachment down since we don't want to be falling behind at any point. And we have that hop in our hand available for the following turn at least. And then this means that we can start hitting for 80 damage with our Drednaw. Or hopefully if we draw into a Samurott, I would much prefer to start attacking with that, as that would reset the energy on my opponent's Pokemon. Also, the Galarian Swordfish does have 130 hit points, which is a bit of an issue, especially for Samurott since we are only dealing 120 damage, so you really do need that stalling effect, putting the 2 energy back into your opponent's hand. And that is one of the issues that I find with this deck. It's just so frustrating to play, because it can be consistent and you can get your evolution Pokemon into play fairly easily, but the attacks are just all so underwhelming considering the energy attack cost. My opponent does use that Meteor Assault to get the knockout on our Shootle, so I'm going to have to promote the Drednaw here as we don't have any other good options and we're not guaranteed to get the Samurott. So we'll start off with Hop, see if we can draw into anything good. We get another Arrokuda, we can evolve into our Drednaw, and we also get another Oshawott that we can put down. Let's use our Great Ball, hopefully get a Samurott. We don't, but we see the Cramorant, so I might as well take that since we don't need any more Drednaw just right now. I'll attach to the active and just hit for 80 damage. Since my opponent did use that Meteor Assault attack last turn, they won't be able to use it this turn. They will only be able to deal 40 damage, and we should be able to get a knockout on this Galarian Surfetch'd on our following turn, assuming of course that they don't play a switch or retreat or any other shenanigans like that. They are of course trying to build up other Pokemon in the back as well, but it looks like they are just resorting to hitting for the 40 damage, and I'm perfectly fine with that as we can easily get the knockout now. So definitely want to attach this energy and we can evolve up into a second Dewott. And I think we'll put down our Arrokuda, we might as well. We can always get our Cramorant back here, since we are going to use Professor's Research to discard our hand and draw a fresh set of 7. We didn't get any other Pokemon that we want to put into play there, still really just looking for the Samurott, but we do get some energy for these coming turns and we can get our first prize card here on the Galarian Surfetch'd. We get a Dan, which is a reasonable pickup of the prizes, and our opponent is going into the Sudowoodo so that they can start using Double Draw again. The Sudowoodo does have 100 hit points, so if we hit into that we're going to be in a little bit of a pickle, as they'll be able to hit back into us and actually get the knockout as well. So we might not want to do that, we might want to be playing Nessa. It would only be for a couple of Pokemon here, but it would paralyze my opponent and stop them from getting a return knockout. Definitely a good option here, I think. I think also potentially using Bede, or let's see what our other attack is. We could hit for 140 with Surf, which I think we might actually do here so that we can use Bede and attach an additional energy onto our bench, which could be a good use. My opponent is building up this Stonejourner, which has a Power Press, it does 120 damage, and if this Pokemon has at least 1 extra energy attached to it, in addition to the attack cost of course, then it does an additional 60 damage. So that's going to be a lot of damage coming in our way. We definitely want to build up some extra Pokemon on our side of the board. So I'm going to use Bede and attach an energy onto Drednaw, and then we'll also attach one on the active so that we can get a knockout here, doing that 140 damage and getting a 1-hit knockout on Sudowoodo, taking an extra prize card here. So we are probably going to have to promote our Dewott here. It does have Aqua Wash, 50 damage, and you can put an energy attached to your opponent's active. So it's very similar to the Samurott that we have in the deck, but it's only 50 damage and you only get to put one energy back into their hand. And of course, one energy is just not the same as putting two energy back into their hand, as they can just simply reattach that energy. So we are in a little bit of a difficult situation here, as we don't have a really good attacker that we can make use of. We could use Flock, but that's just going to get us another Arrokuda. And we could always attach one energy and do 20 damage, but that's not really going to be a relevant attack, I don't feel. Let's just promote an Arrokuda here and allow it to get knocked out while we try and find some backup attackers to make use of. And I think we're going to have to draw a card. I think Hop's going to be our best option to get that guaranteed 3 cards, since Dan is a minimum of 2 and potentially 4 as well. Let's attach an energy onto our Drednaw. Definitely want to get that powered up, and using Surf again if we can. We might as well put down another Oshawott, so that we can get some evolutions onto there once again, and having to pass over to my opponent, and they can just pretty much steamroll us at this point. They are doing 180 damage, so until we're able to deal with this Stonejourner, there's really nothing that we can do about this. As I said, putting one energy back into our opponent's hand is really not enough, and we can put up the Drednaw at least. So we can attach an energy to it and use Nessa to paralyze the Stonejourner, and that'll at least buy us a turn, and we can cross our fingers that our opponent doesn't have the switch to get out of this. So we'll go with the Nessa. Let's see what we can draw out of the discard pile. We'll get 2 Pokemon here, get the Drednaws, and we'll get 2 energy as well. And definitely want to put those back into our hand. Put down the Tootle, and then we're going to hit into our opponent here. Vice Wave for the paralysis and the 80 damage on our opponent. So they have to find a switching card, or else we're going to be able to hit into them once again and get a knockout here on the Stonejourner. And that will bring us up to 3 prize cards remaining, but my opponent is still ahead. So they're going to have to try and find another backup attacker, and they are building up another Galarian Surfetch'd here, which is going to hit us for 180 once again. So it's going to be back on us, but my opponent finds the switch. So they switch into the Galarian Surfetch'd and do the Meteor Assault for 180 and get the knockout, unfortunately. And considering my opponent only has 1 prize card remaining, there's not a whole lot we could do here. We can promote our Dewott and hope that we can draw into Samurott. I think even using Professor's Research is a bit risky, considering we only have 12 cards left in deck here, which is not a huge amount. And I think we'll just have to settle with a Dan and hope that we draw into it that way. That's not what we want to see. Give us 2 more cards, please. Come on. Come on. Yes, 2 more cards, but they're both energy cards. So we've not been able to find our Samurott, unfortunately. And we could retreat into the Barracuda and at least take a knockout on the Stonejourner that way. We might as well go with that. So we'll retreat. We'll go with the Barracuda. And we will hit the Stonejourner and deal 160 damage to it, since it already has 8 damage counters, and we'll get a knockout that way. And I just realised we had a switch in our hand as well, so we didn't actually have to retreat, which is a big misplay on my part, as we have now lost that energy. So if we get Samurott now, then that would have been an excellent attacker, as my opponent's not able to attack with this Galarian Surfetch'd and they needed the switch, but they got the Bird Keeper there, and then they can obviously just retreat for the 1 energy, go back into the Surfetch'd as its attack has been reset, and they are able to take their final prize card. That's a bit unfortunate, but it is just a show of how limiting some of the attacks are on these Pokemon. Let's get into another match. We're kicking off this match with a Lonely Chewtle here, but we did draw into a Wishy-Washy, which is nice. And we can just start piling energy onto this Chewtle so that we can get a Drednaw down. We are up against one of the best decks in the theme deck format, that is the Relentless Flame Charizard deck. Now we do have a type advantage on them at least, so hopefully if we can get set up nice and quickly, then we should be able to start dealing some big damage on some of their Pokemon that are weak to water, like all of their Charizards and their Rapidash, stuff like that. Of course, if they get the Nidoqueen set up, that is going to be a bit of a problem since it is a Psychic type, but hopefully we can get some other Pokemon down here as well to make use of. We did draw into some extra Pokemon here with the Hop, which isn't something that we're too worried about. We'll attach another energy to the active and we'll hit into it with the Chewtle here before we use the Drednaw, as if we evolve into the Drednaw we wouldn't actually be able to attack. So we definitely want to get some damage in with this little Chewtle before we go into the Drednaw. Getting that 40 damage in can be great if my opponent evolves, and it's just going to help us fix some of the numbers. But my opponent is evolving onto the bench instead, so they are just going to sacrifice this active Nidoran, or Nidorino, or whatever it is. And they go for the Professor Kukui as well, just to draw some cards, but their attack isn't actually doing any damage, as it is Call for Family, and they're just getting a Pokemon onto their bench. So we can evolve into our Drednaw here, and attach an energy to it, so that we can start doing some great damage, and we'll also play Rock, Paper, Scissors with our opponent. So hopefully drawing 2 extra cards. Oh, we get a draw, and we fail. Okay, never mind. No extra cards for us, unfortunately. We have a bunch of Cramorant in our hand though, and we can put down another Chewtle. Cramorant isn't the best attacker. I don't really want to fill my bench with Arrokuda if we don't need to, since we have other stuff going on, which is reasonable. And we'll just go with the Vice Wave attack on our Drednaw and get a knockout. Now my opponent is most likely going to promote the Nidorino, but surprisingly they bring up the Charmeleon, so that tells me that they have the means of getting a Charizard out of the deck, or at least they're hoping for one. They have a Cynthia, so it's not guaranteed that they're going to get it, although if they get the Nidoqueen then they can, but they do just draw into the Charizard itself. They just went for it and it paid off for them. So that is going to get a knockout for my opponent. They have an energy on the Charizard already, and then they can use that Roaring Resolve ability to put 2 energy onto itself from the deck. And then discarding all of those energy, all 3 energy, you're doing 50 for each, plus 30 base damage, that's 180 damage onto our Drednaw, which is more than enough to get a knockout on it. And that's really going to put us on a back foot, considering most of our Pokemon take 2 energy to attack, at least 2 energy. Most of them take 3 energy to get a good attack off, and that's going to put us very far behind our opponent. And that's just one of the ways that the Charizard deck here is one of the best decks in the theme deck format, even against decks that it should be weak to and should struggle against. It just doesn't, because it gets set up so consistently and has such strong attacks throughout. So they are using that Roaring Resolve ability that I was talking about, and there is the attack for 180 damage, discarding all the energy, but we have no energy on our side of the board either. So I'll just promote this Wishy-Washy so that we can start building up Pokemon on our bench and try and get some damage in that way. We draw into the Evolution Incense as well, which is great, so we can get Dewott out of the deck and start attacking with that Samurott at some point at least. Although apparently I guess we don't have a whole bunch of Pokemon. We only have 1 Drednaw left, I guess. Yeah, we only have 3 Drednaw in the deck actually, that makes sense. And we do have a bunch of our basics, and the majority of our supporters are here as well. Everything looks good there. We can evolve and we can start attaching energy. I think we'll put the energy onto the Drednaw, I suppose. We don't have a huge amount of choice. Both of them are going to take 3 energy to attack with, and I would really love to get Bait or BD or whatever you say it. I can never make up my mind how to say that card, but yeah, it was the same during the games as well. Let me know what you guys were like. I've played through Pokemon Shield and it was the same playing through that game. I still didn't know how to pronounce that character's name. But we see another Roaring Resolve from our opponent, as well as a bunch of evolution Pokemon on their bench getting set up, and they have the Nidoqueen as well, which is going to allow them to search their deck for any Pokemon of their choosing and just continuously build up any Pokemon evolution lines on their bench that they so wish, especially when these Charizards do ever get knocked out. If they ever get knocked out, then they can use that Nidoqueen to search out Pokemon from their deck after shuffling them in with something like an Ordinary Rod, for example. Now my opponent does get a knockout once again, and as I said, we don't really have a way of getting a return knockout or combating this whatsoever, so we can just promote our Samurott, hopefully reduce some damage, although I don't think it's actually going to make a difference. We have 160 hit points and our ability reduces damage by 30, which means that my opponent would have to be dealing 190 damage, so it does buy us an extra turn at least. So we can do that, and we can attach an energy. We can use Nessa here just to guarantee us some energy, and definitely need the energy for sure. And let's have a look at our hand. I just kind of want to keep the energy around. I think we can get a Tutel and a Drednaw, I suppose, just so that we can get an extra Pokemon into play. Obviously we have the Cramorant, but its damage is based on discarding Arrokuda. It doesn't actually have any base damage here. You see it's 60 times. And attacks like that, you're just going to struggle to get set up, especially in a situation like this where we aren't drawing all that well. We don't have any supporters in our hand, so we're going to struggle to get an attack like that off, and there's not really any use in putting them down. But my opponent is going to be using Cynthia here, and they have the Roaring Resolve once again, plus the energy. So you gotta imagine that they're going to be expending a lot of energy turn after turn here, but they are able to deal some reasonable damage to us. They are taking 150 damage since we did reduce that damage by 30, of course, and we did draw into a Hop at least, which is a usable supporter, so we'll make use of that. Get an energy that we can attach, and we'll just have to pass over to my opponent. Might as well bench another Pokemon. And yeah, at this point of the game, I don't really see any way of making a comeback. We can get one knockout on this Charizard, but then as soon as we do so, my opponent is going to be promoting that benched Charizard and getting a knockout with that, or even bringing up the Nidoqueen and getting knockouts that way. So we see knockout from our opponent, going down to 3 prize cards remaining. We've only been able to take the single prize card, and again this is just showing why the deck is so underwhelming. I definitely would not recommend making a purchase on this deck, not unless you really want some of the cards out of it. I guess if you're desperate to get some copies of Nessa, then by all means go for it, but definitely don't expect anything out of it if you want to play it in the themed out format, or if you want to build a starter, beginner's deck. But if you want to get 2 of these and maybe get a beginner's deck going, it's not the best idea, but certainly there's other good options like the Charizard deck that we're facing down, or again the new Charizard deck that I profiled recently would make an excellent starter deck. Definitely not the Drednaw, unfortunately. And yeah, it's definitely one of the downsides to this series, I think, is going through some of these really terrible decks of late, or even the really old decks that don't hold up anymore, certainly against these new decks. I would love to get a couple of games in with those old decks against another old deck. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, then be sure to leave a comment, or even if you want to get involved and if you have an online account in some of the really old decks, even if it's just like an X and Y deck, then I'd love to get involved and have a match against you with an X and Y deck or a Heart Gold Soul Silver deck, anything like that, so that we can showcase it and see how it stands up against another similarly level deck. But as I expected, my opponent did bring in the Nidoqueen and get a massive knockout. They have a whole bunch of evolution Pokemon, so they're dealing over 200 damage to our Pokemon, and we have no way of dealing with that whatsoever. We'll just have to promote an Oshawott and attach energy, pass over to my opponent, that usual kind of thing. My opponent's going to be taking another knockout here, and there's nothing that we can do about it. We have no means of getting a comeback. My opponent's not even bothering to do anything now, they're just attacking us, as they know that they're going to be able to win this game in the next coming turns. We can promote our Drednaw. I almost forgot what it was called there. It's not as if it's the whole title Pokemon or anything, but we'll promote that and we can hit for 80 damage and pretty much just concede to our opponent. The only way that we could have been saved to take an extra prize card there is if we'd drawn into a Nessa to paralyze the defending Pokemon, but even then we're going to be losing this game overall, and there it is. My opponent deals 210 damage once again, taking their final prize card, and we have a abysmal showing for the Drednaw deck, unfortunately. Let me know what you thought of the deck, if you've played it yourself, or if we think, you could do better with the deck even. And certainly it could be a fun deck, but in this competitive theme deck format, it's not going to hold up against any of the top tier competitive theme decks that are available right now. So I've been That Scottish Nerd. I'll see you guys in the next video.